This video is about adding fractions making like units, which is a more complicated way of saying we're going to teach you the algorithm. Previously, we asked you to solve problems like this, where you create the area model, you have 1/2 plus 1/5, and you divide it up into sections, and you say, count up the sections, and you say, I have 10 sections, and now I have 5 of them, and there are 2 sections, and I'm adding 10 of them. So then I have 5/10 plus 2/10 equals 7/10. That's great, but there's another way that we can do it. If you want to do it this way, that's fine. But I also want you to know how to do it with the algorithm. So let's look at that. With the algorithm, we need to look for a common multiple. What that means is that we are looking for what numbers 2 and 5 have in common. Now you can write it out like I've shown you here. We go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. You can go on forever. And 5s, you count 5, 10. And you look at it and say, they have 10 in common. So if I have 1/2, what do I do to get to 10? Well, I would multiply it by 5. But remember, I need to multiply it by 1 using 5, which sounds a lot more complicated than it is. Right here, I'm looking for a fractional 1. So I'm multiplying it by 5/5. Okay, again, this is a fractional 1, which means it is the same as 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 5/5 is 1. 100 over 100 is 1. 100 million over 100 million is still 1. It's just a different way of writing it. And when I multiply, I just multiply straight across. So 1/2 times 5/5, 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. So 1/2 is the same as 5/10. Now what do I do with my 1/5? Here, I can do the same thing. I'm going to look at that other number. I'm going to multiply it 5 by 2/2 to get to my 10. So 1 times 2 is 2. 5 times 2 is 10. So once again, I have a fractional 1 that helped me get to where I am. And then I can use my 5/10 plus 2/10 to get 7/10. Now we're tempted just to look at the denominators and say 2 times 5 and 5 times 2, but that doesn't always work. Okay? Frequently it will, and when you only have 2 fractions you're using it will, but not every single time. Okay? Here's another problem for you to try on. 1/2 plus 1/3. When I solve it, I did 1/2 times 3 over 3, which is 3/3, which is 3/6. 1/3 times 2/2 is 2/6, because I looked at it and said 2 and 3 both go into 6. So now I have 3/6 plus 2/6 equals 5/6. Remember, when you do your multiplying, you need to remember that it's the number over itself. You must have that fractional 1. Okay? If you multiply any number by 1, it's still the same number. Okay? Make sure that you're paying attention to that. Okay? Try another problem on your own. 5/9 plus 5/6. When I solved this, I saw that 9 times 6 had common numbers of 54, so I looked for that as my denominator. And then I found that 5/9 is the same as 30/54, and 5/6 is the same as 45/54. And when I added these together, I ended up with 75/54. And I knew that I could simplify or reduce that down a little bit, so I moved it, so I found 1 and 21/54. Now I looked at that and said, I think I can simplify it a little bit more, and so I did. And I found 1 and 7/18. Now if you're having trouble with the simplification, that's fine, let me know. The big idea that I'm looking for right now is that you can get to the 75/54. Okay, but again, when we're doing this, show me what you know. Try one more problem on your own. Then I'll show you 2 different ways to solve it. 2/3 plus 1/4 plus 1/2. Now the way that this was first solved was we did 2/3 times 4/4 equals 8/12, because we know that 3 and 4 have 12 in common. So I did the same with my 1/4. So I did 1/4 times 3/3 equals 3/12. And that worked great for the first two. But when I got to the third, I couldn't multiply my denominator by a number that I already had. I needed to figure out how to get 1/2 to 12ths. And I said that I know that 2 times 6 equals 12. So I used 6/6, again, these are all fractional ones here, to find 6/12. And then I took all three numbers, 8/12, and then added 3/12, and then added 6/12 to have 17/12, and then I simplified it down to 1 and 5/12. Now, the next way that you can solve this is similar. Okay, what I did here is I took 1/2 and said I already know that 1/2 is the same as 2/4. So why not take my 1/2 or 2/4 and then add the 1/4 that I already have. And then I can just multiply those common denominators. So then I have 2/3, taking that denominator, multiplying it by 4/4 to get 8/12, and then bring down the 3/4 from up above and multiply it by that denominator as a fractional one, 3/3, to get 9/12. And then I add 8/12 plus 9/12, and I'll get the same solution as before, 17/12, which simplifies into 1 and 5/12. You can use whichever way you prefer to solve these problems.